he's lost everything. All he has is a few newspapers in a satchel. Yeah. And he goes from small community to small community. And in a way, it is the healing power of storytelling. You connect an audience together. This broken landscape full of bitterness and division and violence and anger, those stories connect people.
Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. Today's episode takes us behind the scenes of director Paul Greengrass's new Western, News of the World. Set 5 years after the end of the Civil War, the film follows a veteran who sets out to return a 10-year-old girl to her family after she is taken by the Kiowa people. Their journey across the harsh plains of Texas soon becomes a fight for survival as the traveling companions encounter danger at every turn. In addition to News of the World, Mr. Greengrass's directorial credits include the feature films 22nd July, Green Zone, the Jason Bourne series, and Bloody Sunday. He was nominated for the DGA Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Motion Pictures for his 2013 film, Captain Phillips. Mr. Greengrass spoke with director John Madden about filming News of the World in front of a virtual audience. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
Hi, I guess this is you and me, Paul, I think. I think it's a strange situation. I guess if we were doing this in any normal world, we would be together in the DGA Theatre in Los Angeles. But as it is, we're neighbours on the northeast coast of the UK. But I just want to welcome any DGA members who are watching this as we speak this conversation. And just since it's an audience of your peers, you don't really need an introduction, but I just want to take the opportunity just to salute you and register my admiration for an extraordinary body of work, not just for the intensity and ingenuity of the filmmaking, which is legendary, of course, but also for the fearlessness of the subjects you're prepared to take on. And actually, perhaps most of all, but not the one that would normally be spoken about, just the sheer skill of storytelling, which is an appropriate moment to pivot to what we're here to talk about.
Very, very fun, John.
That's sincere.
It's a great honour to be here at the DGA because that is our peers, and that's.
It is the most important and the most stringent audience we will have. But it's a good moment to pivot, I guess, to the reason we're here to talk, which is about your latest movie, News of the World, a beautiful piece of work. It is, of course, literally about storytelling. We can talk about that a little bit more later, but let's just go back for my benefit as well as anybody else's benefit and just give us an indication as to how this piece of material came into your orbit or you came into its orbit and why you decided to make this movie in the first place.
Well, I think the roots, are in the end of the last film I did, which was 22 July, which was a very dark film about, obviously, the Anders Breivik attacks, right-wing attacks in Norway. And it was really a film about how Norway dealt with the threat of right-wing extremism, because it seemed to me that was a great and clear and present danger. And obviously recent events only serve to underline that. Mm-hmm. But when it was finished, I did feel a deep sense of concern, I suppose, about the dark world. And my kids are sort of in that period of they're sort of entering adulthood, they're sort of making their own way. And that's a poignant time, I think, for any parent, because you do start to think about the world they're entering, and will it be as good to them as it was to me at their age, and will they have the same opportunities, and most particularly, how are we going to escape this kind of division that the last film I'd explored. So I was thinking about making a film that was about where we would find the hope. That was really what was in my mind. Where could we find the hope? What would the road out of this look like? How could I find a story that I could use to mine that idea, I suppose, that feeling that I had. And but you often, if you ask yourself the right question, a story kind of comes into view, and that was the case about 6 months later.
Is it, just to interrupt you for 1 second, is it true to say that it's hard to imagine you not being affected at quite a profound level of having to live in that story and its sort of impenetrability for such a long time, and the need to search for some light in there must have been a part of the decision to...
For sure, that's exactly it. And you know, the film was 22 July. I'm talking about was about how various people, in particular one family, came through that experience, but necessarily whatever hope, if I can put it that way, you could glean from that story was very limited, very partial. So that, you're absolutely right. I'm an optimistic person, and I wanted to find a story that could, whilst being unsentimental, without being, without giving easy solutions, would explore that road. And when I read the novel, I thought, well, this is it. This wonderful novel about this, lonely old newsreader who wanders around Texas in 1870 in the shadow of the Civil War. And then he meets a girl and they go on an adventure because he has to take her to what he thinks is her home. That is the road out of this. They're going on down that road, and the Civil War and Reconstruction, post-Civil War, that's them, but it's also now. So it all felt very resonant and very contemporary. And
you had an urge to tell that story.
I did, and it all made sense to me because it was a Western. I grew up on Westerns. I mean, you remember, Bonanza on a Saturday night.
Yes.
They were always on television. I never thought I'd get to make one.
No.
I had done that or been involved in that Netflix project, Five Came Back, about the 5 great Hollywood directors who went to World War II and came back changed. And I'd done John Ford. This would have been 3 or 4 years before. Yes. So I spent quite a month or so rewatching his film. So he was very much in my mind. And when I read the novel, it was very much like The Searchers in reverse. In The Searchers, John Madden goes out to find, the girl in the desert, the young woman in the desert. In this, Tom Hanks finds the little girl at the beginning and has to bring her home. So it's the sort of Searchers in reverse. So that all made sense. And I wanted to make a different kind of film. I mean, I think all of us as filmmakers, we've always got to try and do something different.
Yes, to move out of your comfort zone.
It's true, and I thought, well, this is an opportunity to make a sort of classical movie, classically shaped movie, a classically wrought film, if I can put it that way, which necessarily associate with me, with my aesthetic, if I put it that way. And I thought, well, that would be great. So it all fell into place very nicely, and Tom obviously was already involved, and that was an opportunity to team up with Tom again, which was fantastic.
Which I imagine you were tremendously reluctant to do.
Well, there's a truth in a Tom Hanks movie. Just get out of the way and let him do it, because he is such a we should talk about that, and
2 captains, of course, too.
2 captains, yes. Yeah. We need a 3rd to complete the trilogy.
Right. So let's just pause there for a second and consider the obvious thing, which is that it by any standards, it is a swerve from a direction of travel that that your films, as I said earlier, commendably have a very, very distinct signature and a very powerful and urgent sense of immediacy and usually overwhelming material that actually overwhelms. That's part of the experience in your work. Not to say, by the way, that this film does not have those elements in it. It certainly does.
No, it's different. It's definitely
it's very different. And one of the chief ways it's different, of course, is that there is an emotional narrative sitting at the core of the film, which is a very different beast for you. I'm not saying it's the only time you've ever done that, but certainly in recent cinematic history, your cinematic history, it's unusual. So not only that, it's a Western, which is a genre that you never approached before. Just let's talk about how you set about approaching that. So let's deal first with the relationship that sits at the center of the film. So Tom was a given. Am I right in thinking that he had come across the material via another source?
And was utterly perfect in the role.
Yeah. Extraordinary. But attracted to it, I understand, partly by the fact that, by the nature of the job that the character had.
The news reading element.
Yes.
I think was also very contemporary. You said earlier it's about storytelling, and that is the truth of it. He reads the news. He's lost everything. All he has is a few newspapers in a satchel, and he goes from small community to small community. And in a way, it is the healing power of storytelling. You connect an audience together, and then he goes to the next community and he connects with them. And so this broken landscape full of bitterness and division and violence and anger, those stories connect people. Stories about local news, but also, of course, the federal news, which is contentious, so it's not easy for him.
Yes.
And I thought that was very interesting because you can touch issues of truth and fact, which are very very profound issues in today's America, certainly, and Britain and across Europe. So all of the storytelling, and it made me think a lot about what we all do. Storytelling is the same, really, whether you make it on film or television or radio or theatre, or and in his case, just standing up and reading. It's the same principle. How do you hold an audience? How do you stay true?
Yes.
Whilst under attack.
Yes.
And also making that connection and holding it with an audience. So it all felt very, very relevant, very resonant of today. Yeah.
Just it's extraordinary, really, how bizarrely, I didn't say bizarrely because I'm sure it was partly intentional, the film overlaps current experience, even more so in the last month or two, let's face it. You share the writing credit on this film with Luke Davis, who I take it Luke Davis had written an adaptation of the book. Right. And you then, how did that work? Just talk a little bit about that. Did you...
A draft, which was excellent. I suppose when I came on, I felt that I wanted to go in quite a radically different direction, I suppose, is the truth of it. And
was that in terms of developing what you saw as a possible kind of contemporary parallel?
Yes, I would say that was the essence of it. I wanted to put it into a more dangerous world and a more contemporary feeling world, and try and make that play. And
I have to say, I think you've handled that. Yeah, I have to say, I think you. Sorry, go ahead, Paul.
I was saying, but all these things are steps on the journey. You know, it's a writer does a draft. It's not. It's a stepping stone to something that may be different.
Yeah,
But it's no. You know, Luke's a wonderful writer, and I mean no disrespect. It was,
no. I think it's fair enough in this sort of situation that you need to make the film into the film you want it to be, and I think,
and you go on the journey.
Yeah. I think it's very easy to imagine, given what you're saying, that the film might feel as if it has something imposed on it, and it absolutely doesn't feel that way. As somebody who's not familiar with Paulette, I'm going to get her name wrong. Yes, Giles. Yes, indeed. Yes, Paulette Giles' book. It feels. Just in a sense, it sort of resonates while you're watching the film, how much, the little parallels and so forth, then the very big parallels and the larger kind of context that you're talking about. But I think that's very, very well handled. I mean, it's strange. And I have to think somewhat accidental, because the chronology wouldn't work otherwise. At the very first piece of news that he's reading about, if I remember correctly, is about a local epidemic. Is that right?
Yes, it was, and that was an example of the core of the novel is really these two characters, Kid and Johanna, and their journey.
Yeah.
His journey to take her to what he thinks is her home. And although I was trying to put it into a more, get the world to press on the characters more, perhaps.
Yes.
But then things happen that are entirely unpredictable. I mean, the reading about the meningitis epidemic that opens the film, of course, that was just one of the things in Texas, if not all across America and Europe. But there were always fears about meningitis and cholera. The epidemic swept.
Yeah. It's completely embedded in the story.
Exactly, but that was a normal thing. But it didn't mean anything other than, to me, dangerous world. You closed the film with meningitis and his discovery about what happened to his wife, but of course, once Billy Goldberg and I started putting the film together, and Billy was sort of the way Billy shaped it kind of suddenly it was, this is the pandemic, but we had no knowledge of that when we shot it.
Of course not. I mean, it's just so striking if you come at it with the perspective that an audience that's seeing it now, a year after you finish the film, and to find that actually the news being delivered is the number of fatalities. There literally isn't a news bulletin anywhere in the world, which that is not the lead item. So, in a sense that sets the movie up as sort of as an experience that the audience is running on a parallel track. But enough of that, because I think it's beautifully done, and its resonance is perhaps something we can come back to at the end. So just going back to the kind of central thing. So obviously Tom was cast, and I assume Helene Wangel, is that how you pronounce her name?
Wangel.
Wangel, sorry.
She was not. And had you asked me at the start of it, what do you think the way you start a project, you always have a sense of what your big problems are going to be. What are the big problems of this project? I would have said the number one big problem would be the finding of the young girl, because I wanted her to be German, because she would indeed have been a German girl, because tremendous numbers of German immigrants came into Texas at that time.
Yeah.
And but I thought it was going to be an agonizing search. We'd see hundreds of young girls. She was going to have to go head to head with Tom. She has to hold a lot of the storytelling herself and doesn't have a lot of dialogue,
Yes.
I thought it was going to be an agonizing choice, and and I'd be anxious the whole way through. In actual fact, it was absolutely the easiest decision, because she'd just done this film System Crasher, which won the Bear at Berlin, and Gail Mutrix sent me a link, and I watched it. And actually, I thought as I watched it, which is an extraordinary film, by the way, if anybody hasn't seen it, about a disturbed child, and she is quite brilliant in it.
Yeah.
And I just, as I was watching, I thought, well, what are the chances of there being two 11-year-old girls in Germany who can act as well as this? It was easy.
I'm surprised you even felt the need to resist it.
We spent the day together, and her mum brought her over, and she was just a natural. And then,
she's. I mean, you're blessed in the film, because.
Well, I'd love to say it was an exhaustive search, but it really wasn't. It was literally she came fully formed, and I had anxiety, of course, as any director would. The first day we shot the scene where she meets Kid in the woods, and that's a big moment. And there's always the thing, she was a long way from home. She was 11 years old. She had a mum with her, of course, but it's a film set far from home. She doesn't know anybody. It's not familiar. It's a big part. I mean, she was. She nailed it.
Did you jump straight into the filming with her and Tom, or did they spend time together beforehand?
Oh, they spent some time together. Not a lot, but they did. And he was wonderful with her. They bonded immediately. Actually, they were really a lovely pair, and they'd sit on that wagon for hours while we set shots, and you could hear them, I could hear them talking to each other. There was one time when, quite early on, I heard her say, "Tom, does everybody swear on an American film set?"
Does history record his reply?
He was a bit dumbfounded. It's like, no, everybody's being very careful, actually.
Rather more, I should imagine.
They were great, and they bonded, and he was extraordinarily generous to her in the way he played. But she held her own. She
more than held her own, I would say. I mean, you could see, if you stood away from it, you could see that there could be traps in the way that part might be played, sort of overt feistiness or hostility, but she never played one color. There's something sort of unbelievably magnetizing about what was going on in her head. It's a very rare gift.
Temptations were, going back to the early evolutions, I mean, I love Paper Moon, Peter Bogdanovich. Absolutely masterful film.
Yeah.
But I felt that which would have been an easy thing to do, to sort of create a young girl who was sort of a bit like that, very sassy and, and all of that. And I thought that was fundamentally, for all that I absolutely adore that film and Peter's work on it, I felt that this child would be traumatized, given what happened to her, and she would have to be silent. And the other temptation was to avoid, which I was very anxious about, was not to kind of have too much humor at her expense. Given that she's a child who's
it would have objectified her, and actually, you're pulled into such an intense relationship with her. You see her through his eyes, and I think a sense of trauma, is evident from the beginning. But and
then she gets to play she gets to play Courage then.
Yeah.
Which is what she really plays. And really, in many ways, the story of their unfolding relationship is her having the courage to face up to what's happened to her, and him gaining courage to face up to his past through his interactions with her. And I thought that's the most truthful and beautiful thing about the film, and the thing that both actors just absolutely nailed,
Yeah, completely. It's also very beautiful, the physical relationship between them. They're in close proximity to one another all the way through the film, but they barely touch, except when they're up against each other in a circumstance.
And never really talk about what's happened to each other, with only one exception. And that was another choice that I weighed at the beginning. I felt that it would be a mistake to show what had happened to either character in the past. One of the strange things about the film is that these profound events have shaped their life, but they've all occurred before we come to the film. And I like that.
I couldn't agree more.
It became the journey.
Unfortunately, you're forced into a kind of a flashback construction, which would not add anything. I mean, your point is, she needs to experience him in the present tense, and he needs to experience her in the present tense.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. And then you have to trust, and that goes to the weight on her as an actor. She has to be able to do as well as Tom. And that is a heck of an ask. And she
must have been gloriously unaware of that challenge, because she manages it.
She has to have all that credit, but Tom as well, because he was so giving and generous. I mean, I remember, in fact, she tells the story, the final scene, or not final scene, but the final scene when they are reunited.
Yes, where he comes back to find her.
Which is, obviously a very, very important scene, and a very moving scene, and
incredibly
beautiful, acting of the highest caliber from both of them. He sat there and gave performances off that were for her, when she was on camera, that were every bit as intense.
Yes, I'm sure.
When when we were on Tom.
Yeah.
And I thought that was the mark of the man, and the mark of
course. Of course.
Generosity, that he would be there, for her no matter what.
No, it's an intensely moving moment in a very, very strong film. Let's just set that aside for a second and just talk about the business of making a Western. And as you say, a more sort of classical style of storytelling. I think people in our profession would be interested in the way that you approach that. Let's just talk about personnel to begin with. Obviously, in a lot of your films, you've worked with a core group of collaborators with whom you have, presumably, obviously, from the point of view of a viewer, an incredibly profound chemistry, understanding, and so forth. And obviously, the first choice that you made was to approach a different set of collaborators in very key positions. And so just talk a little bit about that, Darius Wolski and so forth.
I mean, Barry Ackroyd and I have obviously made a lot of films together, and Barry and I reach way back to days where I remember meeting you. You perhaps don't remember. I remember watching you go into a cutting room. I don't remember what you were making there, but I was a young World Election documentary person. I remember thinking it was a place of unbelievable magic that you were shooting drama. But anyway, I digress. It was important to me. I mean, I love and revere and honor everyone who I've been lucky enough to work with, in whatever the roles, and whatever the things that work in those films are very often down to those people, and whatever faults
they're down to a collaboration, aren't they? They're down to a collaboration.
Wonderful, and they're part of your family and dear friends. I think it is true. Or certainly I felt it to be true, that if I was going to make some films that felt a bit different, and I felt the need to do that, because I think you have to grow and try different things, that I was going to have to work with some new people who would test me. And I had done that before. I mean, prior to coming to make films in Hollywood, I made very small films and mainly television films, actually, but a few small theatrical pieces in the UK. And I had exactly a sort of family crew that I made them with, close collaborators. I remember when I came to do Bourne Supremacy, I wanted to come on my own. It was really important to me to see if I could do it on my own. You know what I mean? There's a protection you get, when you grow up with a first and a DOP and, you know what I mean, and a designer, and they're your team and you love them dearly. But I wanted to have the terror of being alone and seeing if I could do it with a whole load of people who'd be working with, people who were making movies that I'd been to the movies to see, and it was intimidating for me. And I wanted to see if I could cope, and it was important. But then as I got to this stage, I suppose the last couple of films, I began to feel the need, if I was going to broaden out again and do some different things, I had to try some new collaborators. And that's no reflection on all the wonderful people I've worked with. But with Darius, he shoots these wonderful, beautiful, classical, huge movies, and I thought, well, and I love his work, by the way. And I said to him, I'd love you to come and make this. And I spoke to Barry and said, Barry was so good about it, said, totally, I understand. It's like making music. If you make music with somebody different, you play differently. You know what I mean?
Yes, of course you do. I think there's always a paradox, isn't there, in our world, which is that the director, can very easily find himself working with the same people all the time. Whereas those people probably are having the experience of working with other directors.
That's exactly what I said.
So
they all do get the variety, and
it doesn't. It doesn't demand to a betrayal.
Yeah, we need it too, and so I said to Darius, I want to make a more classically shaped film, but I want it to still feel authentic to me. It's, I don't want to feel like the guy who put on flared trousers and went to the disco. You know what I mean? It's got to be authentic to me and feel like an evolution that you would understand. And I thought actually that was going to be quite difficult, but actually Darius, number one, he's such a great company, and we got on very well from that. But actually very quickly, although we came at sort of the look of the film from different places, mine's much more sort of first person and maybe a bit more urgent in some ways. But actually, he's a fabulous DOP. We fell into quite quickly the language of the film within a day or two, really, and it became a lovely collaboration. And I think
it's a fantastic film to look at. I mean, it's, as you might expect with somebody like that behind the camera. It also has I think the hallmark of your work, I referred to it earlier, is that it's very, very present tense, and it's very immediate and very even in big, wide landscapes, you're very close to the experience of the people who are at the center of it. So that is, there, sort of undiluted. And I think collaboration
would be another one. James.
Yeah, well, that's obviously a new departure for you, a different kind of film, clearly. So how did you arrive at that choice?
Well, same thing, really. I mean, who doesn't love James's works like Darius? Yeah. It's just extraordinary, and Billy Goldenberg, of course, cut it. And James,
was that the first time you've worked with that?
Second time with Billy, but first time with Darius and with James. And James, well, he has done so many wonderful scores. He came out, we sat out, we were shooting, I can't remember which scene it was, but we were out in the desert in the middle of nowhere, and it was kind of late afternoon, and we were setting up a shot. And I remember it as one of those memorable moments, when films are done, there's always these sort of little epiphanies you have where you remember being there. And I remember we were sitting out waiting for the, 10 minutes or something, and it was so gorgeous, and the light was coming down, and you've got wagons and horses and all the paraffin and cranes and all the bits and bobs, and you just think, and we were all giggling, the four of us. I think Gary Getzwell was there, I can't remember, but we were all giggling at the idea that here we were out in the desert shooting a Western, and it just seemed such an absolute just a wonderful childhood fantasy for all of us being fulfilled. And on the serious side, I think I mentioned earlier, having done that John Ford thing, and he was very much in my mind. I remember saying, if you look out at those hills 15 miles away, you can almost feel the ghost of Papa Ford. You just have this intimidating sense, actually, for all of it.
I was going to ask you that
enormous footprint. How do you measure up to one of the masters of our craft?
Well, by making your own movie, which you've certainly done, and of course we're not talking about a remake here, but no, I mean it's still a mighty shadow. It's a mighty shadow.
And James, I mean, he nailed that score. I think that's a most beautiful score.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, it's really wonderful. Just to also just talk a little bit about, we were talking before we came on air, as it were, about the experience which you and I both share, but the only one I'm interested in is your experience, where obviously at a certain point, I think just around about the director's cut, the seriousness of the grip that the pandemic, it was about to become a pandemic. So you presumably completed all the rest of the post-production in remotely, the situation we've now become so used to.
It was interesting. Sorry, you can.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm just going to ask you for that.
We shot it prior to Chris, so we were all done. We were shot out by Christmas a year ago, and then we reconvened in London and started cutting. And we weren't very long in when the first lockdown happened and panic. Yeah. And there was this eerie few weeks when you felt it coming, as everybody remembers.
Yes.
And then when we closed down, everybody had to go their separate ways. Billy and various people had to come back to Los Angeles. So we ended up.
You ended up on Evercast, I think, didn't you?
We ended up on Evercast, and I was a bit skeptical, and I was very worried, I'll be honest, because we were not that far in. James and I had obviously met when we were shooting, but we hadn't even begun our work. He was due to come over, and I was due to go over there. There was a whole schedule that suddenly went out the window, and we all went to various different places, in the UK and in LA, and met in Evercast. But actually,
was the score composed remotely as well? Was that all recorded
completely remotely and recorded remotely?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, with one exception that I'll come to in a minute, it was I remember it as a very a very positive experience. We used to meet in the morning, in the room, in the Evercast room, and
that's you and the editor, but presumably, so was the editor working in LA?
He was in LA, yeah. So we would just meet every
So when you say meet in the morning, though, who's morning?
Like this, but we would change about. I'd go late, and,
right.
But that was but actually, and it helped because Billy and I had made the previous film together, so we knew each other very well. And
yes,
but actually, it became. I didn't really. I think after a week or so, I don't think he or I even thought about the fact that we weren't physically meeting.
No, I understand that. It's a new normal, isn't it? I think that maybe we're doing something positive for the planet by not expending large amounts of airline fuel.
With one exception, there was one. Now, when I look back on it, and it was generally although it was tougher in some ways because you're spending endless amounts of time sort of double screening, as it were.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I did find tricky was calibrating length as accurately as I otherwise would, and I think that was because it was just impossible to watch the film in front of anybody.
Well, I have exactly the same. I imagined you'd say that. That's the one big problem, isn't it? Which is that you make a film without the experience ever of seeing it with an audience, which
exactly, and
that's the missing element in an edit, really.
Exactly, and it became, because I think I'm pretty unsentimental when it comes to cutting. I don't tend to get. My films don't tend to be that long anyway. Traditionally, historically. So I don't really ever have a problem getting down. But I found the last 10 minutes hard. Because you get nervous because I could feel that the film was fundamentally playing and it had strengths and it was working well and the performances were great and it looked beautiful, and the story was by and large working. So you get to that place where it's hard to judge the little longers or to get to that moment.
Yeah. Are you holding people right up until the last moment?
And you always feel it when you're with an audience. You go, we need to take 4 minutes out there, we're long there. And what happened was you slightly get a little bit fearful that if you go too far, too fast, you'll lose it in your mind. And that, I think, when I look back on it, we got to a good place, by the way, and in the end...
I don't think you had a problem, but yes, I understand it.
When I look back, that was the difficulty of the remote post-production. Even just down to Billy and I and 3 or 4, going to watch in a screening room. You do have a sense of a film different to when you watch it on the screen behind you. That's harder. I'm sure you found it with the film you've just finished.
No, it's very, very much so.
It's a little harder to get that, that trick where you've got to make yourself think because you've moved rooms to a different theatre. You get a different watch, and that's the watch you want.
I understand. We're just talking about, we should probably wind up around about here, but I just want to ask you one thing, because another thing that's obviously changed during the time that you've been making the film, or rather posting the film, which is a dramatic change. Obviously, a movie that was always destined to be seen on a big screen will now presumably be experienced by possibly even the majority of its audience in a different environment than the one that it was intended for. Not that one excludes or vitiates the other, but what feeling do you have about that and about the possible impact that I think what we're experiencing now will have? It's changing the industry for sure.
Well,
I think in bad ways necessarily, but
look, I'm, colleagues watching will have different views to me. I'm on the more optimistic side of the spectrum, but I'm not blind to the difficulties and challenges. I would see it like this. I think that we face two crises simultaneously. The first one is the obvious one of COVID, disrupting production and decimating exhibition. That's an existential threat to our business. But I think that will recover, and I think it will recover, within 6 months. I think people in pretty large numbers will be back at theatres because vaccines will come in and we all miss the collective experience of storytelling. So I think that one will sort itself out over 6 to 12 months. The other problem is the one, obviously, that is just a different order of problem, which is the rise of the streamers and how will or won't the theatrical experience coexist with it. Well, the truth is, I think about that's driven by two things that are almost beyond our control or are definitely not in our control. One is technological change enables movies to be streamed, enables global content to become a reality. So it can't be unmade, and consumer choices married to that is going to drive it. So I think that the studios are going to, obviously, as they are, develop streaming arms, and the streamers are going to develop theatrical arms, and they're all going to congregate in the central space, offering versions of streaming and theatrical at the same time. And
it may possibly, don't you think, allow a kind of recalibration of the kind of movies that get to be made?
I think a lot of things would be made that would otherwise not have been made. I think that's the good side of it. I think the other thing is that, when I was a kid, you watched a movie once when it came to town. If you loved it, you maybe went twice. And then you never saw it again for years and years and years and years. I'm talking when I was a young kid. That's not the way. And that was the days when there only was a theatrical screen. That was the cinematic experience. These days, kids, young people experience movies in all dimensions simultaneously. They're watching their favorite movie that they like to come out. They're watching it, 3-4 times in the theater, and then they're watching it download probably 3, 4, 5 times. They're watching these movies 30, 40 times. In really quite a short period of time, and devouring movies, at the most remarkable rate. And that's just a different, it's part of the kind of digital universe, really. The movie image now is no longer just a cinematic, it's going to still be a cinematic image, and it's very important that we protect the art of cinema and that we continue to make them, but it will have to live in this other world. And then I'd make one last point, if I may, John, which is that the problem with this film that we faced, and other colleagues watching will have had the same problem. What do you do when your film is ready? This was dated for Christmas Day in the States before we finished shooting, so in 2020 or whatever it was. 2020. 20, whatever it was. So well before the pandemic, we were the Christmas movie for Universal. Then, of course, COVID comes. You get to the fall, 4 months ago. What do you do? What do you do if you're a studio? What do you do if you're a filmmaker? In that circumstance, well, the truth is, lots of films have been moved to the following year. I didn't want to do that because I felt this film really was a film for now.
I understand.
Universal actually didn't want to do it, to be fair to them. And in the end, although that was a sort of, in the end, we released it on Christmas Day, but the choice really became a little bit like, in a smaller way, Chris Nolan's choice with Tenet. We can't just all never release any movies for the next 2 years. I think that's not viable. If we believe in cinema and we believe there are going to be better days to come, we have to at least release a few movies. And they're sort of like statements of faith, really. I mean, Universal are not going to make anything like the return on this film that they would have made in a theatrical world. And obviously it's not going to be the creative experience that I would have wanted, and Darius and I and James and everybody else who made it wanted it to be seen on the big screen. But we do gain this, that we've released it. We've said these films still exist. We're still all making them, colleagues watching are making things.
Which I think actually it's helpful to remind people of that. James Bond recedes ever further into the...
And I'm proud of that. And I'm actually proud of Universal doing that. They did it collaboratively with us. Of course, they're exploring their new model. But, if there are going to be better days to come, and that's what this film's about, and I'm proud of it that way.
Well, I the last thing I'd salute is your optimism, Paul. A man after my own heart. Listen, I'm going to thank you on behalf of all the other people who might be watching this now, or have been watching it, or will watch it in the future. It's a marvelous film. You deserve congratulations, not just for making it, but also for releasing it when you wanted to release it. Well done. Great to talk to you. And good luck with the movie. It's got a long life ahead of it for sure.
Thanks a lot. See you, everybody. Right. Very nice to see you all. Keep safe. Better days are coming.
You too. Okay, you too. Take care, Paul. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, The Director's Cut is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned in the coming weeks as we bring you discussions of films from Andrew Heckler, Ramin Barani, and Eliza Hittman. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow film buffs find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.